Transforming dishonour. What is dishonour? What does it mean? What do we mean by dishonour? My version of this is like dishonour is when we forget that others are aspects of ourself, because then we dishonour ourself when we dishonour another. And we also dishonour ourselves even without someone else being around in lots of ways. There's lots of ways we can dishonour ourselves. So what I want to pit it against dishonour is this lovely word graciousness. So you have dishonour on one side and graciousness on the other. And graciousness is the remembering that emerges organically out of dishonouring. So in other words, there's a purpose for dishonour, for our dishonour. There's a higher purpose. It can show us, it can teach us something. We can't go on damaging ourselves indefinitely or others without this remembering occurring in some way. I mean, we can at some level. So some people do, and they go to their death without having remembered. But then perhaps they remember in another state, in another dimension. Everything comes round through the law of karma. So eventually we have to learn what is graciousness and what is dishonour. So graciousness is more than just a behaviour. Graciousness is a worldview. It's actually the natural worldview, the most natural. And graciousness emerges out of our aloneness. It comes when we're alone. It's out of our aloneness that we have to face our own actions and their consequences. That's why we have guilt and shame and those things, because they're the mirrors that bounce back from the lens of our aloneness. And we begin to see, oh, this is who I am, this is what I've done. When we look inside, when we're honest with ourselves, when we look in the mirror, we which is what a contemplative path teaches us. A contemplative path teaches us and shows us the nature of our dishonour, in all the little ways and the big ways as well. So I, in leading up to this contemplation, I looked and just sort of thought to myself and contemplated all the times and ways that I have dishonoured myself and others. It's quite something. Do a kind of inventory of your dishonourable acts, thoughts, and deeds. Not to make yourself bad, but just to look at some of these things in your life that occur. And, this contemplation, when you look inwards, it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. The beginning of it is uncomfortable because you have to meet those parts of yourself that you don't want, you don't want to face so much. But there's beauty in dishonour. In the Gene Keys, which, these little talks are based on, this is Gene Key 22. And 22 is a double-digit number. It's called a master number. And the master numbers kind of have magical power in them. And the magical power here is to change the game. It's the power of grace. So hidden in dishonour is grace, is a miracle waiting to happen. So dishonour has to be played out. It's part of our humanity. I mean, if you think of like Shakespeare's plays, right? And whether you know them or not, they're filled with all the different behaviours of humanity playing themselves out. And that's like our lives. Our lives are like the complete works of Shakespeare in some way. We play out all these games and theatres of dishonour. Whether we're the dishonoured one or whether we are the dishonourer, the betrayer or the betrayed, all these different things and subtle ways in which we're playing in this field of dishonour. And that's the game, that's the game of life. And what we learn is that graciousness is this other side. So as we come to see our dishonour, we realise, there is something, I can change that behavior. I can adapt myself towards something more honorable, and it's like great sage Vivekananda, he made this great statement. He said, like, God is beyond good and evil, but good is closer to God. So it was quite a clever, wise way of saying good is close to God. So goodness or graciousness, not goodness in a sort of squeaky way, clean way, but it's just us seeing the truth and changing our pattern to one of graciousness, is approaching again the truth. It begins to take us on this journey towards our true self. So graciousness is the gradual realization that you are divine, you are God, you are good. You're beyond good, actually. As the Vedas say, Tattvam Asi, I am that. Graciousness takes us to like that realization that I am all things, I am all beings. If I dishonor that person, even in my thoughts, I'm dishonoring myself. So take a look at your life and take a look at the litter of your dishonor. Once when I was traveling long time ago, I woke up one morning very early, and I went out into this town. It was in Colorado, and it was obviously a Sunday morning. And I went out, and there'd been a big party on the village, on the kind of town green the night before, and there was just litter everywhere. And this beautiful little pristine town, Durango, it was called. And I just picked up all the trash. It was like 5 a.m. or something, and it was a mist. It was a beautiful day. And I just spent like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I got into this rhythm of just picking up all the trash, and I found a bin bag, a trash bag, and then I started filling it, and beer cans and all the rubbish and stuff. And after like an hour and a half, I created this beautiful, pristine green with nothing on it. I tell you, it was the most incredible moment, because it's like, that's the purpose of, that's the symbol of graciousness. No one has to know. You do it because the field that's created out of it, the field of honoring, is so powerful in your own transformation. And the other thing about this key is that it is deeply feminine. Is that the other side of dishonor are the arms of the mother, of the holy mother, of the great mother, the divine feminine, who allows all dishonor to take place and then forgives us. And we have to enter into that forgiveness ourselves. And that in itself is part of the transformation that comes from our dishonor. So I hope you can see that there's a journey in dishonor, whether you've been dishonored and you're feeling that, or whether you have dishonored, and I can guarantee you have in some way dishonored yourself. To allow, sometimes we dishonor ourselves by allowing ourselves to be dishonored in a certain way. We weren't holding the boundaries clearly enough for ourselves, and so there's always some juicy learning in it, and some grace, and I hope that you can begin to see that as you consider these things. Thank you.